Welcome back to FHIR in 5, or as some people have commented, maybe I should be calling it FHIR in 7 minutes and 45 seconds, as I can't seem to quite get it down to the 5-minute mark. But I hope you're getting some value out of these short, sharp intros into FHIR and use it as a way of finding out something more about a part of the standard that you haven't worked with yet, or just trying to get your head around. So this topic today is we're up to letter C, and there's so many of the FHIR parts that I could have picked with C: capability statement, credible concepts. You know, there's heaps, but I've focused on consent today. This is where I'm really going to struggle with the 5 minutes, but we'll do our best. So before I get into this topic, I need to point out that this part of the standard is set at trial use. From maturity level, it's FHIR maturity level 2. So, you know, it is subject to change. Anything like this, we just need to take a little bit more care around how we implement it. But I will say that, you know, the strength of the standard comes from implementation, trying these things and really proving what works and what doesn't work in the standard, and then feeding it back into the standards community to make it better than it is. So I've just got a link there to the consent page that goes into a raft of detail in consent. Consent's a really complex subject, and nothing that I can do in 5 minutes is going to make it any less complex. So I put the definition there on what the FHIR spec says around consent, and just some examples of the types of information that can be captured through this consent resource. If you think about things like the patient consent, so, you know, how parts of the patient record expect to be accessed and used for what purposes, agreements to collect information about consent, but also medical treatment consent. I consent to be treated for this particular condition. There could be consent around research, so secondary use of data can be something that you might want to capture consent about, especially if you're providing anonymized data to an external party. Does a patient consent for that information to be sent? Also around advanced care directives, consent for medical treatment would fit in that bucket as well. There is a lot of information now that we can capture about the consent itself. We can categorize it, the type of consent, the scope of our consent, so what information we're saying that we're consenting to give or to revoke, and the status of that. Is it an active consent or is it inactive? We can also capture signatures about the consent. So if it's a scanned document that the patient signed that they consent for care, or they consent for secondary use, you might want to capture that information and attach it to the patient's record. We can add that into the consent resource, as well as any sort of questionnaire or forms that maybe the patient has completed to indicate their consent. We can capture what policies are covered by the consent, but also information about the constraints that might be applied to this particular consent. I want to deny access to a particular group of clinicians, or I only want to permit certain types of clinicians or organisations to access my patient's record, or to consent to treat. Is there a date range that's valid for the consent? So I might provide consent for a period of time and then revoke it. So all of those attributes can be defined within the consent model. It is a really rich part of the FHIR standard. although it's only maturity level 2. So really have a look at the FHIR standard in this regard, see how it maps to the consents that you need to capture and how you can make your solution work with this part of the FHIR standard. If you want to find out more information on HL7 FHIR and the Dedalus DC4H or Digital Connect for Health platform and how it implements FHIR and specifically the consent services that are provided as part of that platform, please contact me at Dedalus or any of the Dedalus team to find some more information about DC4H. There's also a link coming up that you can go and find out more information for yourself. Thank you.